All right, what's up, everyone? Detroit Lions News Podcast on the JC Sports YouTube page. Obviously, the kid is asleep. The wife is organizing stuff, so it gives me time and it gives me a chance to, you know, show my feelings about what happened and what we watched today. You know, one thing can be said about this Detroit Lions team. They were in a must-win situation, and to come out like that, I don't really care how you come out. I really do not care how you show out on a Christmas Day, but today was just brutal. When you think about the statistics of just who you're playing Max Brosmer. Okay, if you don't know who Max Brosmer is, he's a former Minnesota quarterback at the University of Minnesota. Not even like a great Power Five school. The University of Minnesota, the Golden Gophers, which is more known for hockey. And Max Brosmer throws for, get this, 51 yards. 51 yards. And that's not all. I mean, their yards per play. If you look at the Vikings, 3.2 yards per play. You say there's no way the Detroit Lions are going to lose to the Minnesota Vikings. No way. There's no way that they're going to lose the Minnesota Vikings. And yet they did. And I come away from this game thinking a couple things, and I'll share them with you just as I'm going. But the first thing is first. I put it on my Twitter, which is which is JC Sports Detroit. Okay, I put it on my Twitter. I said there's a lot of nonsensical takes that will come out of this Lions season. So when I went back to my predictions and I went back to my strengths and my weaknesses, one of my strengths was the defense, and it was the secondary. The secondary was the offensive strength and elite playmaking group, right? The defensive was the elite secondary. And the more and more I looked at it, it became more and more apparent, especially with the loss of Kirby Joseph, that we weren't going to see that elite secondary that we were promised for whatever reason. And it just sucks because that's a unique playmaking group. When you look at the elite secondary, I mean, Branch, Joseph, those are all pro guys. Okay, DJ Reed battled injuries this year. Arnold battled injuries this year. And then what happens is when Arnold goes away, when DJ Reed's battling injuries, you put a guy like Amik Robertson, who is mainly a slot corner. You make him and you put him out on the outside, which seems good in theory, but the reality of the situation is he's not an outside corner. So you lose Branch, you lose Joseph. That's a huge thing. That was one of your strengths coming into the season from my point of view. Okay. And then we go to OC, offensive coordinator play calling, and DC play calling. So offensive coordinator play calling, we all know how that went. Johnny Morton got shit canned out the door. He's still in the building, but he's going to get shit canned no matter what. The defensive coordinator, Kelvin Shepard, the way that he coached, I mean, I got to think, like, if it was Aaron Glenn as defensive coordinator, would the Detroit Lions be better off than they were with Kelvin Shepard? I think so. Lions offense, would they be better with a coordinator? Obviously you lose Ben Johnson, but would they be better with this just an average offensive coordinator? What happened here is a multitude of issues. Dan Campbell takes over play calling. You see the team and the game situations and the way that this team was focused, you've seen it just take a nosedive right down. When Dan Campbell became the play caller, it took a nosedive right down. Dan Campbell is better as a CEO than as a hands-on guy. Period. End of story. So when the offensive coordinator gets shit canned, when the defense coordinator is not doing his job, he can't be in two places at one time. So he's focusing on the offense, and other spots of the team are falling apart. Special teams, defensive coordinator. We've seen Dan Campbell in recent years when the chips were on down on the down. He was there to support the defense. He was there to support the special teams. He was there at every point in turn, and he was better because he was there to support the player personnel on the team. So the misuse of Dave Montgomery is because of the offensive coordinator being ass. The defensive coordinator not being is a rookie too. He did better than Johnny Morton, but the reality of the situation is Dan Campbell is put in a situation because of his own malice, because of his own choices, that he was put into a situation where he put two people who were rookie offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. When he had the chance to get a Lou out of Adaromo, he had a chance to get a Dennis Allen who went to Chicago. Instead, he went with the guys in the building besides Johnny Morton, but Johnny Morton was in the building at one point. But you look at those decisions in the offseason, you go, okay, that could doom you right away. My whole questions was pass rush other than Hutchinson, Arnold's development for defense, but it was about play calling too. And on the offense, it was interior offensive line and the offensive play calling. And what do you know? The Lions didn't get nothing out of their offensive play calling, and they did not get nothing out of their interior offensive play, their interior offensive line. And I'll give you this stat. The interior of the offensive line gave up 64 pressures and 7 sacks. The worst of them all was Christian Mahogany with 4 sacks given up and 23 pressures. Now, when we look at it in conjunction, Ratledge had 23, Glasgow had 18. The worst player was Mahogany. He had 4 sacks, 4 hits, 23 pressures. Tate Ratledge, 2 sacks, 8 hits, and 23 pressures. So he wasn't great either. But the best of your line was Graham Glasgow, a veteran player. And it goes without saying, there's no replacing a guy like Frank Ragnow. There's just no replacing a guy like Frank Ragnow. There is no Frank Ragnow just hanging out in the streets. So them going to Graham Glasgow as a center was probably the best bet. But we've seen today the center depth was obviously not there. And with the botched snaps and all that jazz, it wasn't good at all. It really was. It was terrible from every word of the imagination. And the guards. I mean, Christian Mahogany, I'll give him a credit. He's a 6th round pick. He's better than he's played, but the reality of the situation is pretty simple. It's pretty simple. He wasn't good enough. Just wasn't good enough. You give up 4 sacks, whatever. Rookie Tate Ratledge, he had some good weeks, he had some bad weeks, but the reality of the situation, he's got to get a lot better. The three things I had as the strengths and the weaknesses, 2 of them came to roost, and one of them that was a strength became a weakness, and that was the secondary. Like I said, the elite secondary that they had, it didn't come to fruition for whatever reason, injuries, all that jazz. And you could blame this on Brad Holmes. You really can blame this on Brad Holmes, because if he would have focused on the pass rush, maybe you could have avoided some of the things that happened with the secondary. But the reality of the situation is there's no replacing 2 All-Pros. There's no replacing 2 All-Pros. Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, there's no replacing them, period. And I thought the time where the offense really took a nosedive, Dan Campbell takes over, Laporta gets hurt. If you go back, you watch the games, Laporta not being able to be in the game really had an effect on this team. Like, we always think of Sam Laporta as the guy who catches passes, the guy who scores touchdowns, the guy who does this. The reality of the situation is he's more than that. He's a great run blocker. He spearheads the run game. And that extra offensive lineman is something that the Detroit Lions needed. And even if Brock Wright was in here, maybe that could have done a little bit for Detroit. But they got thin on the tight end depth. They weren't good on the offensive line. And it really just went downhill. from that standpoint. We could look at it from every standpoint. I see the comments, the "we're good" comments. Oh, the Ben Johnson, you miss Ben Johnson. The Lions don't miss Ben Johnson. The Lions miss Frank Ragnow. The Lions miss having a critical tight end. They don't miss Ben Johnson. And the weird good statistics, the weird good uh, comments are just stupid because there's nothing that the word good comments you really could have done. Think about it this way. If Brad Holmes goes out and gets Trey Hendrickson right now, there's no saying that he could be injured right now because he's injured right now. Am I correct? There's no and there's no replacing a secondary that's banged up. Yes, you could get pressure, and the Detroit Lions, for whatever reasons, they're one of only 2 teams in the NFL with being in the top half of sacks. Elkody Mohammed, Aiden Hutchinson. They did a great job this year. But the reality of the situation is Lee McNeil didn't come to play. Their secondary got decimated. When Brian Branch went down with the Achilles injury, he was a major emphasis. He was a major player in the run defense. You've seen that take a hit. There's a lot to be said about this Detroit Lions team, but the one thing I cannot sit here and say is that, it was all because of Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. They deserve blame for a little bit of it, but the majority of it, replacing guys like Frank Ragnow, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. You don't just replace a guy like Frank Ragnow. We're not playing effing Madden. We're not playing Madden. Like you can go on Madden and edit the overalls, and we got a center. Cool. That works. In the real world, you don't get that chance. And there's a majority of teams that when they, lose a center, there's only a handful of centers in the NFL that are truly great. And Frank was one of them. And then you go to the other side of the ball, secondary, right? Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph. We, as fans, we totally underestimated what Kirby Joseph meant to this team. I'll say it again. We totally misunderstood what Kirby Joseph meant to this Detroit Lions team. It was described to me from someone who was a quarterback, not in the NFL, but in college. And he told me, look, when you got a guy like Kirby Joseph patrolling the back, you always have a second look of where he's going and where you're going to go with the ball. And if he's in the same area that you're going to go with the ball, you're going to go somewhere else because that guy is a pick-off artist. Him not being in the secondary hurt. And the reality of the situation is him having this injury that we don't know the long-term effects of Kirby Joseph injury. That's troubling. That's really troubling. Brian Branch with the Achilles injury. Will he have the same explosiveness? We don't know. Will he be the same player? Again, we really don't know. But the reality of the situation is this team had every opportunity this Minnesota game to really right the wrongs of what they were doing, and they just couldn't do it. And for whatever reason, whether you're a fan of the Lions, whether you're a fan of the NFL, what the Lions were able to do with what they had at some points was remarkable, but it came when you played decent teams, it came to roost. Offensive coordinator issues, when Dan Campbell stepped into that role, you've seen this team fall by the wayside in terms of their overall team. And that's on Campbell as well. I mean, you go with rookie guys in a Super Bowl window, this is what happens. When you make the choice to go with rookie offensive coordinator, rookie defensive coordinator, it could go great. It could go great. But the reality of the situation is sometimes it doesn't. And I think that's what Dan Campbell learned this year with Kelvin Shepard and with Johnny Morton, which, we heard about Johnny Morton and his philosophies and the way he does things, but you know, just not a good year for the Lions. And when we get into the offseason, we'll go position by position and kind of break it down for people to see, like, okay, this is where we got to really go in the draft and all that jazz. But the reality of the situation is the injuries mounted, the decision of offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator came back to bite you in the ass, two. And three, interior offensive line, you can go with two unproven guys and a veteran. Your best player at the offensive line was your veteran and Graham Glasgow. But the reality of the situation is the rookies, Tate Radlich, Christian Mahogany, they struggled. They struggled really bad. So it'll be on Holmes to do his self-scouting, to do his scouting with his team. One of the things that is really not mentioned enough is scouting your team. This is the one fault I have with Brad Holmes, and I'll say it to you because it's open air, opinionated. The one fault I have with Brad Holmes, and it's just truly the one fault. I think he's a great drafter. I think he sometimes gets in his head where he can go places, but his biggest fault is trusting guys on his own roster too much. And I remember a comment from Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes about you can't fall in love with your own guys, right? I need Dan Campbell and I need Brad Holmes to really take that to heart this offseason. No more Marcus Davenport. Do a really clean scout of Christian Mahogany. Do a clean scout of Ratledge. Ratledge looks like a pretty good player. I'm just giving you what I'm saying. Do a clean scout of some of the guys you have in the back. Do a clean scout of this, and then go attack those guys in free agency. Go attack those guys in the draft. But what I cannot take this offseason is for Brad Holmes to do what Brad Holmes has done the last two off seasons and keep the players that really haven't shown much. Levi Onwuzurike. Okay. Marcus Davenport. Okay. Josh Pascal. Oh, okay. Like those were his biggest blemishes. And I know he believed in Pascal. He believed in Onwuzurike, but you have to stack talent. In the NFL, NHL, it's primarily a depth business. Players are going to get injured. Players are going to get injured. Obviously, you're trying to avoid your major players getting injured. In the NFL, we've seen all over the place. Like the Packers without Micah Parsons, it just ain't the same team. Mahomes without the Chiefs, not the same team. So you losing Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph, those are two all-pro players. I don't care how it goes. Maybe you get a defensive end group that could really get pressure on the passer. But the reality of the situation is that secondary that was a strength when we came into this year. Branch, Joseph, Reed, Arnold, Robinson, injuries. And another self-scout thing I would do if I was Brad Holmes and I was Dan Campbell is I would look at the medical staff. I would see, okay, how many injuries could we prevented? How many of these injuries could we prevented and kind of kept under wraps? That's the major thing that isn't mentioned is the technological medical research that goes into being an NFL franchise. And the amount of injuries that the Detroit Lions have had the last 2 years is uncanny. It really is. And you could look at it any way you want. Obviously, the Hutchinson injury, that's going to happen. He shattered his ankle, okay? Shattered his leg in pieces. But, Branch's injury, could that have been avoided? Kirby Joseph injury, could that have been avoided? You look at all these injuries and there's some that could have been avoided. I would definitely do some pre-scout and self-scout of my organization, of my medical staff, of my team, of my coaching staff, of my scouting staff, every way that you look at this, because the reality of the situation is the Brett Holmes, Dan Campbell, they have a standard that they set, and they did not meet that standard or even exceed that standard. So where we are in this situation, there's a lot to be said about this team. And there's a lot of ways it can go, but that's just a couple of the ways that I would go. All right, let's get to some comments. Matt Wolf says, get rid of Goff. Need mobile quarterback. Huh. Okay. Okay. Here's the difference. Okay. Mobile quarterbacks. Okay. I'm gonna give you a list. I'm gonna give you a list of players, okay, that are good under pressure. Quarterbacks that are good under pressure. I knew this question was gonna happen, so I basically said, all right, let's do it. I'm gonna give you 5 quarterbacks that are good under pressure. Okay, the top 5 of quarterbacks. Mind you, Jared Goff is ranked number 14. Okay. And I want you to tell me, would you take the top 5 or would you take like the bottom 5? Which the bottom 5 I really don't really trust either. But here, let's just go through it, okay? Number 1 in passing under pressure in completion percentage, Prescott, Daniel Jones, Drake May, Lamar Jackson, and Tua. Out of those 5, who are you taking? Who are you taking? Are you taking Lamar? Okay, I can get with you on that. Are you taking Dak Prescott? I mean, I can get with you on that. I think Dak Prescott had an MVP type year. But the reality of the situation is he don't win much games, and he has never been a playoff winner. Are you going to take Drake May? I'll say this. Drake May is freaking fantastic. I'd probably take him. What about Daniel Jones? Coming off an Achilles injury, just like Brian Branch. Are you taking him? No. Are you taking Tua Tagovailoa? No, you're not taking Tua Tagovailoa. You're just not. So let me give you the quarterbacks around Jared Goff, okay? At 14 is Jared Goff. At 15 is Justin Herbert. At 17 is Bo Nix. 18 is Matthew Stafford. 19 is Patrick Mahomes. 20 is Jordan Love. You taking those quarterbacks, or are you going to go with the top half? See, you can have it any way you want. You can have it any way you want. You could say that passing versus pressure is a need, or you could just say what it is. Mobile quarterbacks is not what makes a good pass player under pressure. Like I would say Lamar Jackson is good under pressure. He's got 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Okay. The lowest interception ratio when under pressure, Stafford, Jones, Williams, Brissett, and Jared Goff. Bryce Young, Jackson Dart. That's the list. Okay. So you want to say who gets the most touchdowns? Well, Jared Goff, in that sense, he doesn't get a lot of touchdowns under pressure. But I would say this. If you think that passing under pressure and being immobile really matters, Jordan Love doesn't do it either. Jacoby Brissett doesn't do it either. And so being mobile is one thing. Passing under pressure is another. I'd value passing under pressure and completing the pass more than being mobile. Okay? That's what I believe. So I look at the drop back percentage. Jared Goff's been pressured a lot. The reality of the situation is this: I can't pin this all on him. He had a hell of a year. Jared Goff this year, when we talk about Jared Goff, 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and 2 of them came today. Okay? I can't blame Jared Goff for this year. Jared Goff's probably the reason you're even close to the playoffs. So there you go. Good take. 3 offensive linemen. Was beat all year. Rookies cannot come in and replace Ragnow and Zeitler. Critical impact injuries, especially in secondary. San Francisco went through retooling last year and they came back on fire with the draft and good signings. Here's the thing. A lot of people will look at it as they think of it, okay? There's going to be a lot of people that look at it and they go, Ragnow, Zeitler. Okay. Zeitler wanted to go to Tennessee. He was very well orchestrated with that, and he told people that. Ragnow, there is no preparedness for Ragnow retiring after the draft and after free agency. If you would have done it before free agency, maybe you could have really picked up the pieces and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go on. Okay, period. Maybe you could have got Drew Dahlman. But the reality of the situation is when Frank retired, you are putting no man's land. Literally no man's land. And I don't think Frank was a bad guy, but the situation and the timing of it was awful for the team and basically the offensive line. So I can't sit here and say with, that Brett Holmes could have prepared for this better. There is no prepared to lose Frank Ragnow. There's just not a preparedness to lose Frank Ragnow. What do you want me to say? And a lot of people are going to say, yeah, you could have drafted this guy. You could have drafted this guy. There's no easy answer to that. Like, you just drafted Tate Ratledge. Okay. You drafted Tyleik Williams. I think Tyleik Williams had a better year, but you got to understand that there is a progression in the way that they do. So any center that you draft is going to be slow on, the play calling. They're going to be slow on the protections. That is going to come into effect. So keep that in mind. That's just the way it goes. Brian says, too many injuries. We can't get rid of Goff. He's under contract, but I wish we could. The offensive line is horrible. We need a true center and guards. Yes, losing Branch and Kirby was the major blow. That's what I'll say. Losing Kirby, losing Branch was one of my things that I thought was a strength of this team. The defensive secondary was the strength of this team. When you got DJ Reed in the offseason, there was no person that said, oh, damn, we signed DJ Reed. We signed a terrible cornerback that was absolutely terrible. No, that's not even the case. When we signed DJ Reed, most people were like, hell yeah, we got rid of Carlton Davis and we got DJ Reed because Carlton Davis is injured and we got, a majority of his career. And we got DJ Reed, who was a damn good cornerback for the Jets. That's what we were saying. And, it didn't turn out that way. DJ Reed had injuries. He wasn't the same after the injury. You lose Kirby Joseph. You lose Terran Arnold. You lose Brian Branch. Just a total seismic avalanche in that secondary. And then in the moment when you put a guy like Amik Robertson out there, okay? I love Amik. I think Amik is probably one of the best. He's a great player, and I love the way that he thinks. But here's the statistics on Amik Robertson. You want to hone in on how bad Amik Robertson was this year. Here is his stats. He allowed 67.4% of passes to be completed. He was targeted 95 times for 64 passes, 3 penalties. He gave up a long of 64 yards. His average depth of target was 11.7, so that's a first down every single time. He gave up 253 yards after the catch, which was more than any other cornerback that played a significant portion of the game. And his rating against was 110. 110. He had 1 interception, 9 pass breakups, and he had 11 forced incompletions. 10 forced incompletions. And he gave up 6 touchdowns. So, look, I like Amik, but when you have to rely on him to go to the outside, and then you add in a guy like Rock Sin, how did he do? 6 penalties. He didn't allow people to complete the passes, but for 51.2%. But he gave up 2 touchdowns, and when he was targeted, he was giving up 76.2% of the passes. So even then, it wasn't good. Thomas Harper, who came in for, Kirby Joseph and all those guys. You go over and over and over, like the secondary really got decimated by injuries. Arthur Millette, Avonte Maddox, Eric Hollett, Meek Robertson, Rocky Sin, Thomas Harper. Those were the guys that were counted on, and they weren't nowhere near as good as they could be. And that's because you lose 2 All-Pros and you really start to fall apart. Just is what it is. And when you think about the run defense grade, your second best run defense guy was Brian Branch. Put that into perspective. He was your second best run defense guy. He goes away, he gets hurt, and then next thing you know, you have he gets injured in Dallas game. You get ran all over in the game against the Rams. Ran over for 230 yards against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were averaging 49 or 60 or something coming into that game. Brian Branch getting hurt just was a final death nail. And I thought there was one guy in particular who made this really smart suggestion. And I got to give credit to where credit's due, because there's a lot of times I don't agree with what he says. But Mike Valeni of 97 won the ticket said the same thing that me and James talked about when Brian Branch got hurt. And when Brian Branch got hurt, I said, is this going to affect the running game, the run defense? And James and me were like, it could, perhaps. You look into the statistics, you look at what happened after the fact. Losing Brian Branch was the death nail for this defense. And it goes to show you how good he is. He was the second best run defender on this team. And he didn't miss many tackles. When you look at the players that didn't miss the most amount of tackles, Jack Campbell, Roy Lopez, Brian Branch. Those are the top three. And you look at stops. Brian Branch had 16 stops. That was the most of any safety that you could ever have. You go down, not many of them were able to do that. So Brian Branch getting hurt was a huge emphasis on this defense falling apart. And the statistics show it, and everything shows it. That's just the reality. So is there another Brian Branch you could bring off the depth piece? No, you're not going to have another Brian Branch as a depth piece. And I don't care how good I don't care how good your defensive line is. If you don't have the secondary or the guys that can come up there and make the tackle, you're done. A guy like Brian Branch is so versatile. And I don't think fans really recognize it. But you're seeing the last 3 games, defense has fallen apart. In this game, not really, because Max Brosmer had 51 freaking yards, okay? And the Vikings only rushed for check it. The Vikings rushed for 3. I take it back. The Vikings rushed for 5.6 yards per rush. Okay, I take it back. It was a bad game. Shows you how much Brian Branch really mattered to this team. So there you go. Nathan, it's the arrogance of his team. We didn't say there's nothing we can do, even though we try. He simply laid his dick on the table and got hit with a spike bat. I think this is the whole "we're good" statement. I understand where it comes from. My point is this. When he said we're good, what were the situation that this team was under? You think about it. What were the situations that this team was under? They probably had better reads on some of their players. They probably knew some players were going to come back. They got a good prognosis on Ali McNeil. They thought that the secondary can carry him, and it did for the first couple weeks. And then when the defensive line finally got healthy, the secondary fell apart. See, this is what we're not understanding as a fan base. We're not understanding that, yes, the secondary could fall apart tomorrow. But the reality of the situation is you could have the defensive line that is so good, so fantastic, But if the secondary falls apart, you lose a Kirby Joseph, you lose a Terrion Arnold, you lose a Brian Branch. It doesn't matter. They're going to get wide open. And in the case of Brian Branch, you lose Brian Branch. He helps in the run game. That's just the way it goes. So there's context into the "we're good" statement. I understand what you're coming from. He could have done better in terms of the defensive end depth. I agree with you, but there is absolutely nothing Brad Holmes could have done to replace a Brian Branch getting injured, a Terrion Arnold getting injured, and a Kirby Joseph getting injured. Nothing. You lose all pros like that, there's nothing that you could really do. I mean, unless you find all pros off the streets. There was that one show called Pros vs. Joes. What a great show that was. But it showed, the all pros are the all pros and the Joes are the Joes. And unfortunately, I'm a Joe. So there you go. That's how it goes. Ali says Jared Goff socks. Yeah, you know what? You know what's funny about Jared Goff socks? Those would be very comfortable because he's became a security blanket for the Detroit Lions. Like, you think about it like this: if Jared Goff wasn't as good as he was with the 37 touchdowns and the 5 interceptions that he had, how bad would this team be? How bad would this team be if they had a quarterback that was bad under pressure, like a Caleb Williams, like a Jordan Love? I mean, I would hope I get socks with the security blanket that Jared Goff has presented for the Detroit Lions. I mean, Mike Frazier, he kind of he kind of hinted on it. There you go. Guy says, Ali, you are a dope. Offensive lineman couldn't keep Tom Brady up behind a rookie center and 2 rookie guards. I'll say this, and I'll say it as nicely as I can. I don't care who your offensive lineman is. I don't care who your quarterback is. What Jared Goff did this year behind a makeshift offensive line, with Graham Glasgow being your best offensive interior player, it's pretty spectacular. I mean, for you to even be in this spot, to be one of the highest scoring teams. And it goes to show you when you go play the better teams, like the one thing I don't really understand, and Guy, you're right. And all the people that have said about Jared Goff, you're right. When you go back and you look at this year and you go, what did the Detroit Lions do? What did the Detroit Lions do against good teams? The interior offensive line got absolutely bullied. And if I go and I look at the NFL pressures, the NFL Pro, I go look at the quarterback pressures by game. Like, I could go look at it right now. But I could guarantee you, without a doubt, that he was getting pressured at an enormous pace. I could guarantee you he was getting pressured at an enormous pace. When you go play the best, you go play the best quarterbacks, you go play the best defenses, you got to be protected. And the way I look at it from Jared Goff's standpoint, and I'm going to look it up right now, but we're going to look by game and see how many times he was pressured. A single week, a single game. We'll look at it right now. So, quarterback pressures. He was pressured week 9 against the Vikings, loss. Pressured the most against Eagles, loss. Pressured the most against Steelers, loss. Pressured the most against the LA Rams, loss. In his 8 most pressured games, he was pressured 12 or more times. And he was sacked 5, 2, 3, 1. He wasn't sacked in the Washington game, which is the game he won. He was sacked 3 times against Green Bay, 4 times against Green Bay, and 3 times against the Giants. So, I mean, it goes back to show you, like, you go play good teams, they could pressure the quarterback, you're going to have a problem. And I can't blame that on Jared Goff, because the reality of the situation is, in every one of those games, Jared Goff's EPA per dropback was in the plus territory. I can't blame Jared Goff for that. And his pressure rate in the games that he lost, I mean, you think about this, is he was pressured uh, a ton, and he still had 37 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. That's a pretty good year for being as beat up as this offensive line has been. All right. Chris Wink says offensive line trash and JG is a liability. This is on Brad Holmes. Like I said earlier in the podcast, you could say this is on Brad Holmes. You can. The offensive line being trash is one thing. Jared Goff being a liability is one thing. But the reality of the situation is, it is what it is. And there was no replacing Frank Ragnow. There was no replacing Kevin Zeitler. You went with the youth movement, kind of a Ratledge and Mahogany. It didn't work out. That's just the way I look at it. Jason Mullane says injury excuses. See, I love when people say the injury excuses because the fact of the matter is this. Any amount of time, any team, any player, whatever, my stance is the same. When you lose all pros, it doesn't really matter. You know, the next man up is the most biggest line of bullshit I've ever heard in my entire life. Next man up. Yeah, the next man up from an all-pro is what? The next man up from an all-pro is what? Thomas Harper? Daniel Thomas? Avante Maddox? Give me a break. Give me a break. It's like saying next man up for the center, and the center is Frank Ragnow, and the center is Graham Glasgow, the backup center. So there you go. That's just the way it goes, in the way I think about things. So there you go. Mr. Colorado says sell the team, which we haven't heard those in a while, but there they come percolating again. Shepard can go. Chris Wink says. Chris Ware says strength and conditioning team. Also, what do they do in practice that could contribute? That's something I would look at. I would look at overall assessment of the strength and conditioning team, what we're doing in practices. I would use every available tool to research and do what we're doing to find out, am I doing it? Is my medical staff doing it? How do we get better and how do we move forward? That's what I would do. When Ben left, his team left. I don't believe that because they're a top team in points. So when Frank Ragnow left, the team left. Let's just be honest with ourselves. Trade Goff or eat the money. Yes, I know it's more than Goff, but he's not a championship quarterback, for God's sakes. What is a championship quarterback? Like I just gave you the statistics on guys who are good under pressure. Let me give you it again. Would you take Dak Prescott as your quarterback that you would lead as a championship team? Would you take him? Would you take a guy like Tua Tagovailoa? Would you? Would you take a guy like, let's go Daniel Jones? Are you going to take Daniel Jones over Jared Goff? Okay, if you do, cool, that's fine. That's fine with me. Are you going to take Lamar Jackson over Jared Goff? Okay, if you could. The one player in this top 5 that I would take over Jared Goff is Drake May. And that's it. That's it. So there you go. Too many excuses, and when it came to Goff, I don't even know why. What's an excuse? Facts? Because all I've used is facts. You know, you could say it's excuses. Again, people could say it's excuses to use facts. Go where you go. Go where you go. You can't be a statue. We don't need it. We don't need a statue. Okay, well, let me give you a breakdown. If you're a statue, which I would include CJ Stroud as a statue, okay? He doesn't run much. But it doesn't matter it doesn't matter about running. Like what are we saying? What are we saying? You want to bring Patrick Mahomes as a running quarterback? Cool. But guess what? He can't pass under pressure either. He's one of the worst quarterbacks under pressure. Jalen Hurts, one of the worst. He's right there with Jared Goff. So again, what are we saying? You want a good quarterback under pressure? Fine, I'll give you that. You want a good quarterback that runs the ball? Whatever, dude. You want the best running quarterbacks? Caleb Williams, Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield. Caleb Williams is the worst quarterback under pressure. So give me this. Would you take a quarterback that's good running the ball, or would you take a good player who can pass under pressure? Because in my opinion, the championship quarterbacks, they pass under pressure. You want a statistic that'll give you the statistic of all statistics? In 2024, the best quarterbacks under pressure, Jared Goff was 6. Okay. Jared Goff was 6. Brock Purdy was 5. Kirk Cousins was 4. Geno Smith, Joe Burrow, and Baker Mayfield were the top 6. Where did Jalen Hurts rank? 19th. Okay. Wasn't really good, but whatever. Patrick Mahomes, he was 10th. Again, I'm kind of proving my point, but the reality of the situation is you could have a statue or a mobile quarterback. Mobile quarterbacks don't really do good, okay? Name me a mobile quarterback that has actually won a Super Bowl. You could say Patrick Mahomes, but I would say Patrick Mahomes has an NFL arm. You could say Russell Wilson was probably the last one. There you go. Stats and being mobile are two different things to me. Then what classifies as mobile to you is what I would say. James Dillard says the injuries caught up to him. We should just rest the offensive line, defensive line, and have them recover. Luckily for us, we got a decent draft pick, and now we're going to be 4th in the division. We need to pick up OC this offseason and patch up some of the holes on the offensive line, defensive line. We will have an easier schedule next year as well, which is what the 49ers did this year. I'm looking forward to this team doing great stuff next year. I agree 100%, and I think that's where they're going to go. But this is exactly what I'm pointing to. The 4th place schedule is really going to help you. It helped the 49ers, and the reality of the situation is it'll help you. You're going to be better than those 4th place teams, so that's the way I look at it. No one cares about the other stuff. Chris is going to play this quarterback game. Draft a quarterback to sit behind him for a year. Name me the quarterback who you would draft, okay? Name me the quarterback. I'll wait. This is, you hear experts talk, this is probably the worst quarterback draft to draft a quarterback. Like, they're literally talking about if the Giants have the pick, the first overall pick, are they going to pick Fernando Mendoza, or are they going to punt to go to next year? Interesting dynamic. Chris Ware, they also need to wear pads too. This league is pitiful with injuries, direct blows to the knees, blah, blah, blah. I know there's other injuries, but they need to wear pads. I think we always wore them. The close up for offseason period, cashed out, nothing left, end of a short era. I don't believe this is the end of a short era. I don't think that the Lions are going to head in the wrong direction, but I will say this. It's soul-searching time. It's soul-searching time in Allen Park. Defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, you could have went outside the building. You didn't. Brad Holmes, you could have brought in more players. You could have done this. You didn't. You decided to roll the dice with the rookie players. You paid the price for that. You paid the price for bringing rookie guys in there. Ratledge, Mahogany. Mahogany was basically a rookie. And then you put Glasgow in there. I understand why Glasgow's in there. But again, you rolled the dice with rookies in the interior of the offensive line. And this is what you got. So that's on Holmes. The coordinators are on DC. But the injuries, which I have said, are a big issue, especially when I thought the strength of this team would be the secondary, and the secondary gets decimated by injuries. That hurts you. It's all good. We're going to get back next season. Exactly the way I look at it, Dante. Same way I look at it. They'll be fine next year. They just got to rework some things, get some more talent, make the right coordinator hires. I think Shep is the right coordinator for the defense. But going with 2 rookie coordinators to start this season, I mean, probably wasn't a smooth move, and it kind of proved my point that, 2 rookie play callers probably the right way. And you had guys beating down the door to come here, and there was connections with Lou Anaromo. There was connections with Dennis Allen that went to Chicago. There was connections for offensive coordinators, but you decided let's go with the rookie coordinators who have never called a game, and you kind of got what you sowed. So if I'm Dan Campbell, it's time to look in the mirror. Brad Holmes, time to look in the mirror. But the injuries, in my opinion, is what really did this season in a big way. Because when your strength becomes your weakness, you kind of get beat down. And I thought Branch was the last linchpin to that strength. And when he got hurt, you seen the difference. One of the best run defenders on this team. When he went down, you saw the difference, and that's just the way it goes. That sounds crazy. A man has to figure out how to get out of a situation that doesn't make sense. You can pass all the way what you want to, but if you find a way out, you're one dimensional. No, no. Being one dimensional does not matter. Being one dimensional does not matter. Completing the pass is what matters. Completing the pass is what matters. Look, you could be mobile and you can run for 1,000,000 yards, but the reality of the situation is the best quarterbacks in this league complete passes under pressure. Always been that way. It will not change. It will not change. Unless Caleb Williams wins the Super Bowl this year, I remain steadfast. What are you going to say? You want a mobile quarterback? Okay, you can have a mobile quarterback. I'll give you Daniel Jones. I'll give you Caleb Williams. Do you want those guys? No, I don't want either one of them, especially Daniel Jones after an Achilles injury. Honestly, they're not shown tonight in shows. They'll have some cleanup to do in the offseason, find a new OC and take a good quarterback during the draft and fire Brad Holmes. Hold up. Fire Brad Holmes. We're gonna fire a guy who has really put a really good imprint on this roster, and I'm not gonna sit up for Brad Holmes because I've already talked at nauseum about what Brad Holmes has done and what it means. But the reality of the situation is Brad Holmes built and developed this roster into the situation where they're in right now. So you think about it like this: they played good, they drafted good. There is obviously issues with the way Brad Holmes has done things, but there's always issues. So I'm not going to sit here and act like it's going to be entirely different. But the reality of the situation is I love what he's done as a roster. He could have done a lot better last year, as I've said. But the reality of the situation is there's absolutely nothing Brad Holmes could have done to replace Frank Ragnow. We live in a fallacy land, man. People love to live in fantasy land. I love it. Jesus says, "Hey, I'd like to know your opinion. What went wrong with the team? Was it just having the toughest schedules, injuries? They took away our coordinators, and what makes me angriest is the referees hurt us so much all season. It's a combination of all three. Okay, schedule obviously was tough. You had the injuries to the secondary, which obviously manufactured itself, and then having rookie play callers was another issue. And I don't think that those issues really got better as the season went on, but that is the way it looked as the season went on. So, it is what it is. Just not a good year for the Lions, especially like Jesus said. It was a combination of all those things: schedule, injuries, and the coordinators. And then you add in the simple fact of Dan Campbell has to take over play calling for the rookie coordinator, and then that added to it. Jason says, send Goff, Monty, and some picks for Josh Allen or Joe Burrow. I love that idea. I wish I could do that. Even Madden wouldn't accept that offer, dude. Come on. Honestly, they're not showing up tonight, and it's pretty obvious. They'll have some cleanup to do in offseason, and they should a good draft and fire Brett Holmes. All right, whatever. Todd says, "What a beautiful Xmas! Nothing better than seeing the Lions fans get booted from players. Couldn't have having a bunch of big mouth crybabies." No, Todd, you're on a YouTube page talking about the Lions. Whole humbug, bro. Whole humbug. Um, I like this. You are what you are, which in your case. Yeah, there you go. Uh, it was really only the Addison sweep that got us in the run game. Yeah, but again, I go back to rushing and yards per rush, 5.6. They had 8 yards rushing on 28 attempts. The rushing was an issue last game. It was an issue in this game, and it is what it is. It kind of goes without certain that you lose Brian Branch and your rushing defense goes to shit, which was a linchpin of your defense. But you lose Brian Branch and suddenly teams that run the ball at will kind of proves a little bit of you have the secondary, you have the players, but the players that are trying to fill those spots, they're not doing a good enough job. Victor says, "Man, we need to change. Here's what we need: an offensive corner like Ben. Period. Need a better offensive line, and need one defensive player to help punch on." Probably the most realistic take out here, Victor. Agree with you 100%. You don't need a Ben, but you need someone that's competent on offense. You need a good offensive coordinator. You need a better offensive line. Offensive line can't be as bad as it was this year. And you do need one defensive player to help punch on the other side. Al-Qadi Muhammad did a pretty good job this year, 9.5 sacks, top half of this league. But the reality of the situation is, if we're going to look at it as a standpoint of how they're going to get better, offensive line, play callers, period. That's where it goes. And Goff is a good quarterback. Goff did a great job. 37 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. Tell me you wouldn't take that with any roster. Tell me you wouldn't take that with any roster. 37 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Didn't turn over the ball. Today was his worst game. 2 snaps were on the center. One was on, and 2 interceptions, but I think the snaps were terrible, and 1 led to points. But you're not wrong, Victor. Chris Ware says, "Anybody else remember when we needed to get rid of Stafford every season?" It's the same crew. Chris, it's the same damn crew. Things do not change. Lions fans have superiority reporting complex after 3 good seasons. Time to get humble, get back to reality. Oh, you come on a Lions YouTube page to give out your opinion, Maul J-Day. Oh, man. You sad little man. You sad little man. Lost to a team with 3 passing yards. 3. That's look, Joey. What you're saying is the part that really gets me. 3 net passing yards and you lose. The quarterback had 51 passing yards. 51. If you would have told me the Vikings had 51 passing yards, I would have said the Lions are winning in a landslide. But the Lions just couldn't get out of their way, and the Vikings defense was really good, and it came to fruition. This was probably the worst game that you could play, and I think the 2 worst games that the Lions played were against the Vikings. But I didn't expect Max Brosmer to beat the Detroit Lions. That was absolutely hilarious. To Max Brosmer, really, yeah, 51 passing yards, TJ. 51 passing yards, and you lose. You could say all elite quarterbacks are mobile, okay? Whatever. Being mobile doesn't mean anything to me. Doesn't. Goff is the last of a dying breed, but the reality of the situation is I'll have to get the statistics of who runs the most as a quarterback, but the reality of the situation is we'll see what happens. But yeah, there's not many quarterbacks like Jared Goff in the league, but I tell you what, I value completing passes under pressure more than I value being mobile. Because if you're mobile, and you're a guy like Caleb Williams who completes 30% of your passes under pressure, I don't want you. I just don't want you. David Kennedy says we have to play calling was the issue. We have premier receivers, keep airing it out, constant blitzing. Great, 100%. Defensive adjusted to Goff inability to bootleg and RPO. Blitz heavy packages work better versus Goff, especially with a compromised offensive line. Agreed 100%. I would say having a run game, a competent run game would help out a lot. But the reality of the situation is with a compromised offensive line, it's very easy to defend Goff. And with a compromised offensive line, it's really easy to defend any quarterback that's out there. That's what I look at. Bart says, I'm an Eagles fan. All you guys talk about is offense problem. They have talent, but no coaching. It's your defense. That's what won our Super Bowl last year. Glenn was a fraud. Jets are stuck with him. I will say this, Bart. If Aaron Glenn was our defensive coordinator this year, with the injuries that we had last year, it was remarkable to see what he was able to do with the injuries that he had on the defense. We look forward to this year. The injuries on the defense became a really big issue, and I didn't think Kelvin Shepard adjusted enough. So, yes, defense is an issue, but I think it more has to do with health than the personnel, in my opinion. Way to go. Jake says what we're going to end the podcast on. There's not a single quarterback in the league that could have done a thing today with the offensive line the way that they did. And I'll agree with that 100%. And that's the way we're going to end the podcast, because no matter how you slice it, mobile quarterback or not mobile quarterback, there's not a quarterback that's going to be able to do what he did today. And I'll be interested to see what the pressures were. I'll be interested to see how many times he was pressured and how many dropbacks. But the reality of the situation is he was pressured a lot. And the center, and it was a makeshift offensive line. No Decker, no Glasgow today. And it was just a total shit show. And the reality of the situation is, when your passing gets 4.8 yards per pass, that means that you got no time to throw. No time to throw. So I look at the way the Lions lost this game: 5 sacks, 34 yards. Jared Goff was hit 8 times. You're not going to win many games like that. Just won't win many games like that. And yards per rush, the Vikings had 5.6, 158 yards rushing, 28 rushing attempts, and they win the football game. But the reality of the situation is those 6 turnovers. Losing, the center exchange was off. So Glasgow not being there was huge. This is things that they're going to have to look in the offseason. I mean, Glasgow was good enough, I guess. Your 2 rookie players were the biggest, cog in the wheel, which is, that's the way things work sometimes. But this, even, Jake says it here, even the running backs had no space. There was no space to compete. There was no space to get out wide, and they fell apart. And that's just the way it goes. So, rough game, rough week, rough 3 weeks, to be honest. And we'll see you again on the Detroit Lions News podcast as we talk more Detroit Lions football. Follow JC Sports Detroit. We'll give you more YouTube content, obviously, for Lions and Red Wings, Pistons, Tigers, whatever sport you like. And we'll see you guys in the next podcast. We talk more Detroit Lions football. See you guys in the next one.